Hi, my name's Althea, and at my graduation, I thanked my stepfather. The crowd clapped, cameras flashed, and in the very back row, my real dad stood up and smiled like I'd meant every word for him. But I hadn't. And yet, he clapped anyway. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Because buried under that applause was something darker, a pattern of edits, erasures, and signatures I never knew he signed. My mother said he forgot my birthdays. Turns out, she forgot to deliver his letters. They threw him out of every picture, every story, every spotlight, and I let them. But now I can't stop asking, how many parts of your life would you rewrite if you finally saw the version they never wanted you to read? Graduation ceremonies are supposed to be loud with celebration, full of proud smiles and open arms. But that afternoon, standing behind the curtain in my cap and gown, I didn't feel any of that. I watched the crowd from a narrow slit between the curtains, searching the rows of chairs as the event coordinator whispered something about timing to the next speaker. My name was on the program. I was the valedictorian, but it still felt like I was just another guest in someone else's show. The folding chairs shimmered under the Idaho sun. White tents flapped in a breeze that couldn't decide if it wanted to cool us down or just irritate every speaker's note cards. I spotted my mom first, Marlene, sitting in the front row, pristine as always, legs crossed, lipstick fresh. Next to her sat Everett, my stepdad, dressed like he was going to a company retreat. His name badge was clipped neatly to his suit. Father of the graduate. I scanned the rest of the rows. It took a moment, but there he was. Langston, my real dad. Alone, in the very back row, sitting on a folding chair without any label. No one talked to him. No one even looked at him. He wasn't on the seating chart. Of course he wasn't. I stepped back from the curtain and adjusted my tassel. Something in my chest pinched. Not sharp, just persistent. Like a sock slipping inside your shoe. You could walk through it, but it never lets you forget it's there. When they called my name, I walked onto the stage, applause rising like a wave that didn't quite reach shore. Everett stood up and clapped the loudest. Marlene smiled like she'd planned this moment since I was born. Langston? I couldn't even tell if he'd clapped. I didn't look that way. I took the microphone and stared at the sea of faces. I had rehearsed this speech so many times, but suddenly my throat felt like it was wrapped in cotton. I smiled anyway. Good afternoon, everyone, I began. Today isn't just about grades, or scholarships, or diplomas. It's about the people who got us here, the ones who showed up, the ones who made sure we felt seen. My voice didn't shake. Not once. I was proud of that. I continued, weaving my way through the middle of the speech, the crowd quiet and attentive. When I reached the final lines, the ones I knew would be remembered, I paused just long enough to make it feel earned. To the man who taught me consistency, I said, eyes directed squarely at Everett, who drove me to every practice, waited outside in the car even when I stayed late. The man who showed up, not just for the big moments, but for the Tuesdays and the quiet ones. Thank you, Dad. Everett placed a hand on his chest, visibly moved. Marlene dabbed at the corner of her eye. The applause came strong and steady. Then I heard a different kind of clap. Slower, louder. Langston stood, alone in the back, and clapped as if he had every right to. He didn't stop when others did. His smile was calm, not forced, not sad, just peaceful. I froze. He clapped like he'd been the one I was thanking. It wasn't performative. There was no smugness in it, just a kind of quiet dignity that only confused me more. I stood there, gripping the sides of the podium, unsure if I wanted to run to him or pretend I hadn't seen it at all. After the ceremony, people crowded around Everett for photos. Friends called out, "Dad, get in here!" as if there were no other candidate for that title. I posed. I smiled. I even laughed once, but every time the shutter clicked, a part of me dimmed. Langston stood off to the side, hands behind his back. He didn't approach until most people had dispersed. When he did, it was with hesitant steps, I turned slightly toward him, but Marlene pulled me aside, pretending not to notice him coming. By the time I looked back, he was already stepping away. A classmate, someone from yearbook, leaned in and asked, "Is that your uncle?" I nodded before I could stop myself. The sun was setting behind the bleachers. The crowd thinned, chairs were being stacked, laughter echoing in the distance. I spotted Langston one last time. He was standing by the school's photo wall. Dozens of snapshots lined the panels. Homecoming, band concerts, class projects. He stared at one particular photo, me, from 7th grade, holding a science fair trophy with a smile too wide for my small face. He took out his phone and captured the image silently. Then, without turning around, he slid it into his pocket and walked away. I woke up to a phone buzzing nonstop on my nightstand. Group chats, Instagram DMs, a few texts from people I hadn't spoken to since sophomore year. It didn't even occur to me that it had anything to do with me, until I saw the TikTok link. The caption read, "This is wild. Bro really thought he was getting thanked." I clicked play. The clip showed the tail end of my graduation speech, panning slowly across the audience. It caught Langston, my real dad, standing alone in the back row, clapping with a quiet pride, like the words I had just spoken belonged to him. And I guess, in his mind, maybe they did. The comments came fast and sharp. Delusional old man vibes. "She clearly wasn't talking about you, Grandpa." "This is actually so sad." There were thousands of them. And it wasn't just a few clicks. This thing had gone viral overnight. I stared at the screen, not even fully understanding how it made me feel yet. He had smiled. He stood like someone who had waited for that moment, who believed it was his, but I hadn't said his name. Not once. So why did he look like I had? Later that morning, I met a few friends at a diner just off Fairview. We always went there for post-event brunch, pancakes big enough to shame your decisions, and coffee that tasted like regret. As soon as I slid into the booth, Becca pulled out her phone and smirked. "You've officially made the For You page," she said, showing me the clip again. "That guy in the back? Your stepdad totally handled that moment like a pro. But your real dad? Yikes!" Everyone laughed. I smiled. Or tried to. The kind of smile that sits on your face like a sticker, not stuck, just hovering. I stirred my coffee, eyes unfocused. They kept talking, but my mind was already somewhere else. Was it really that funny? Or just cruel? When I got home, I made the mistake of checking the trending hashtags. Graduation Dad was gaining traction. One post in particular had racked up nearly 300,000 views. It was a side-by-side clip. On the left, me gesturing toward Everett, calling him Dad. On the right, Langston rising slowly, clapping like he'd just received a Lifetime Achievement Award. The caption, "Best stepdad ever gets the moment he deserves." But something changed as I scrolled through the replies. Wait, where's her real dad? That guy in the back? Who stood up clapping? That was him? Now I feel kinda bad. The tone had shifted. The tide was turning. I replayed my speech, now from memory, not video. I could still hear myself thanking the man who showed up for the quiet moments. That line had been about Everett. At least, I thought it was. I remember looking at him, focusing on him, tuning everything else out. I hadn't looked back, not once. Not toward the folding chair in the back. Not toward the man who had driven in from Oregon, probably hours early, just to sit in a chair no one even labeled for him. They say the internet never forgets. But what if I'm only now remembering what I forgot to feel? Just before dinner, I got a message request from someone I barely knew. Brianna Stokes, cheer team, class of 2 years above me. Someone I hadn't spoken to since she borrowed my charger in biology. Her message read, "Hey, I was at the ceremony. I think your real dad thought you were talking about him." That was it. Just one line. No emoji, no follow-up. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at her words. Then I opened the video one more time. Not to watch myself, not to see the speech or the reaction. This time, I watched only Langston. The way he stood, the way he clapped, the way he smiled like a man who hadn't heard his name, but had felt his soul mentioned anyway. And for the first time, I didn't laugh. I didn't even blink. I wasn't looking for anything that morning. Just a roll of leftover ribbon and maybe the "Congrats Grad" sign I had borrowed from our neighbor for the backyard party. The garage had always been Mom's territory, organized chaos with shelves full of boxes labeled in her familiar sharp handwriting. Most of it hadn't been touched in years. I was climbing over a plastic tub of Halloween decorations when I spotted a faded box wedged behind an old stroller and a roll of weed barrier. It was marked old school stuff. I assumed it held spelling tests or macaroni art, but when I lifted the lid, the dust billowed like it hadn't been disturbed since middle school. Inside were drawings, random notebooks, a broken pencil case, and at the very bottom, a bundle of envelopes tied neatly with twine. The handwriting on the top envelope stopped me cold. It was his, Langston's, slanted, clean cursive I hadn't seen in over a decade. My heart didn't race. It clenched, like it had just missed a step. I sat down right there on the concrete, hands trembling slightly as I untied the bundle. The first letter was dated June 13th, the summer I turned 8. He wrote about how proud he was of my third-grade report card, how he couldn't believe how tall I was getting. There was a photo clipped to the corner. Me on the jungle gym, toothless grin, sunshine in my eyes. Where did he even get that? The next letter was from the following year. Then the year after that. Some were birthday cards with crayon drawings tucked inside. Others were simple notes, words of encouragement before dance recitals, scribbles about how he heard from someone I made the spelling bee finals. In one, from when I was 11, he mentioned my science fair project. "I heard you built a volcano," he wrote. "Next time, make it erupt during the judging. That's how you win hearts." There was a pressed flower taped to the page, something I vaguely remembered picking on a school field trip. Alongside it, a printed photo from that trip. And there he was. Blurry in the background near the fence line. Sunglasses, baseball cap. Watching. I kept reading. 13 letters in total. 13 years of his voice, his thoughts, his invisible presence in my life. All addressed to me. None ever delivered. I remembered Mom saying, "He forgot again this year, more than once." Or, "Let's not get our hopes up." Those words had shaped so many birthdays, so many silences. And now I knew they weren't true. She didn't just protect me. She edited the story. By noon, the box sat beside me, wide open. I had only moved when my legs started cramping from the concrete. I brought everything inside, cleared off the dining table, and began organizing the letters by year. I didn't cry, not yet. I just kept rereading them, like I could somehow fill in the time lost between the ink and the truth. The last envelope in the stack was thicker. Inside was a printed photo of me on stage during a middle school talent show, singing, awkward posture, unsure of myself. But the photo had been taken from a distance, through the chain-link fence that surrounded the outdoor seating area. That day had haunted me for a while. I'd spotted a man behind the fence, someone I thought might be a school janitor. I remembered wondering why he was standing so still. I'd convinced myself it didn't matter, but it had been him. He wasn't allowed in, but he came anyway. My breath caught in my throat. That image reframed everything. The birthdays, the missed recitals, the forgotten moments. He wasn't absent. He was locked out. And I had been taught to stop expecting him. I sat back in my chair and whispered, "You showed up. You always did." That was when the real emotion hit. Not just sadness. A strange, slow-building fury. Not explosive, but cold. What happens when you build your identity on an absence that never existed? I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I just picked up my phone and began taking pictures. Each letter, each card, each envelope. I created a new folder and named it The Missing Years. Not to post. Not yet. Just to have. That evening, I finally texted my mom. "Were you ever going to tell me about the letters?" No reply. I went back to the table and picked up the very last envelope, one that had somehow slipped beneath the others. It was dated just 2 weeks ago. Inside was a birthday card. "Happy 18th, my girl," it read. "I know it's your big year. I'm still cheering for you, even if I'm not in the photo." He didn't miss my birthday. She just made sure I'd think he did. It was almost evening, the light outside soft and lazy, draping itself across the kitchen floor like it had nowhere else to be. I was at the dining table with my laptop open, sipping cold coffee that had started the day hot. My intention was simple: find the first draft of my college admissions essay, a version I hadn't looked at in months. I wasn't even sure what made me think of it. Maybe it was the letters, or the way Langston clapped like he believed the words had been meant for him. The document loaded quickly. I recognized the title. The paragraph breaks, but something felt off. The line I'd loved, about how the silence between us wasn't empty, but full of meaning, was gone. I stared at the screen, brows drawn, heart inching up my throat. That line had been one of the only things I had allowed myself to write about him, my real father. It was the one sentence that felt too honest to touch. I opened the version history and scrolled back. There it was, highlighted in red with a side comment. Too vague. Maybe make it about Everett since he's been more visible? Mom read ink, digital, but it cut the same way. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I didn't know if I wanted to scream or laugh. So instead, I whispered to no one. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a replacement. That draft had been the one I submitted, the one that got me the scholarship, the one that now felt like a co-written piece of fiction with a ghostwriter who hadn't asked for credit but took authorship anyway. Later, I found myself digging through the file cabinet in the hallway, the one Mom always insisted I never mess with. I said I was looking for an old tax form for FAFSA verification. It wasn't even a good lie, but she didn't press. Tucked between insurance papers and bank statements, I found it. A mailed confirmation addressed to Langston Burris, dated over a decade ago. 529 college plan details. The paper was crisp, pristine. It had never been opened. My pulse picked up speed. I went back to my room and opened my laptop again. A few clicks and some quick research confirmed it. The plan was under Langston's name. The money was his, not Everett's, not Marlene's. It wasn't just tuition. This fund had been quietly growing to cover everything else the scholarship didn't. Housing, books, living expenses. My future had been mapped out, and they never told me. I didn't storm into the kitchen like some daughter in a TV drama. I walked, calmly. I sat across from my mother and placed the document between us. "You made me take his name out," I said. She looked up from her phone, unbothered. "What?" "You edited my essay. You erased Dad. You hid the letters. And now I find out he's the one who paid for college?" Her fingers froze mid-scroll. "Althea, you could have just told me. You could have given me a choice." "You were too young to understand," she said, reaching for her glass. "I did what I thought was best for you." "No, you did what was most convenient for you. You weren't protecting me. You were rewriting me." That was the first time I saw her flinch, not outwardly, but behind the eyes, like a crack just started to form, spidering beneath the surface. Everett stepped into the kitchen just then, holding a basket of laundry. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between us. "Ask your wife," I said, standing. Neither of them followed me as I walked down the hall and shut my door. I sat on my bed for a while, the envelope still in my lap. Then I picked up my phone and dialed. Langston's number rang 3 times before going to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I just whispered into the silence. "I think I found your version of the truth." It started with a photo album on the kitchen counter. Just sitting there, like a plant someone forgot to water, but was too sentimental to throw away. It was Everett's way of leaving gifts, always in public spaces, always meant to be seen without saying a word. Next to the album sat a printed copy of my graduation speech. Laminated, highlighted, annotated. His name was underlined twice. On the top corner, scrawled in his handwriting, was the caption, "So proud to be the father she deserves. We got here together." I flipped through the album slowly. There were pictures of me with Everett, smiling at the graduation party. One where he held the car keys mid-air. Another where he had his hand on my shoulder like we'd rehearsed the pose. It was curated, intentional, and worse, it was being reshared. His post had already hit 2,000 likes. Comments poured in. "You've always been her rock." "She's lucky to have you." This speech melted my heart, Everett. "You're the reason she's who she is." But it wasn't just their praise that stung. It was the way I couldn't even argue with it. Because the words were mine. Or at least, they started that way. I opened my laptop, found the first draft of my speech, and began comparing. I remembered every revision, every suggestion from Mom, every time Everett offered to proofread while I was too tired from work shifts and senior projects to care. And then I saw it. The original paragraph. The one where I had written about Langston. The man who taught me how to endure silence with dignity, who stood in the shadows but never disappeared, who showed me that love doesn't have to speak loudly to be present. Gone. Replaced with lines about constancy, school drop-offs, the stability of Everett's hand on my back at conferences, the kind of stuff that plays well in photos, the kind of stuff people repost. What had been edited wasn't spelling. It was blood. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I printed both versions, laid them side by side on the counter, next to his album of illusions. And with the calm of someone preparing an autopsy, I added a sticky note. "I'll decide who I thank and why." Then I logged into Instagram and removed the tag from Everett's story. That night, over dinner, he called for a family moment. Just him, Mom, and me. No Langston, of course. There was garlic bread and overcooked salmon and a performance of normalcy so rehearsed it should have come with a playbill. Everett took a sip of his wine, leaned back like a man about to deliver a TED Talk. "You know," he said, "what matters isn't public perception. It's who shows up. People see that. People know." I didn't break eye contact. "No, Everett. They see the version you uploaded." Marlene dropped her fork, but no one looked at her. The room was too quiet after that, filled only with the low hum of the dishwasher cycling in the background. The unspoken tension crackled like bad reception. After dinner, I went upstairs. My phone buzzed with a new message from a local lifestyle blog. "Hi, Althea. We'd love to feature you and your stepfather in our Father-Daughter of the Year segment. Quick Q&A? You two are such an inspiration." I stared at the message for a long time. My finger hovered over reply. And for once, I didn't want to be polite. I wanted to be accurate. I wasn't expecting anything important that day. It was just a stack of mail on the kitchen island, sandwiched between a coupon book and Everett's dry cleaning receipt. But one envelope caught my attention. It had the college financial office seal and my name, handwritten in black ink. I assumed it was a duplicate of my aid summary, something routine. But when I opened it, my stomach did a slow, steady drop. Inside was a breakdown of cosigner responsibilities for my housing and supply loan. I hadn't seen this version before, and at the bottom, where the signature block sat, the guarantor line didn't say Everett Kincaid. It said Langston Burris. Not Everett. Not even as a backup. I stared at the paper like it had personally betrayed me. My father, my real father, was the one who signed for my future. Quietly, completely, invisibly. I didn't even bother rereading it. I picked up my phone and called the financial aid office, heart pounding as if I were trying to outrun the past. "Hi, this is Althea Cadell. I'm calling about a recent cosigner document I received. Can you confirm who is listed as my guarantor on file?" The hold music felt like it lasted an hour. When the representative returned, her voice was cheerful, oblivious. "Yes, we have Mr. Langston Burris listed as the sole financial guarantor. He provided income verification and credit documents back in March." I hung up before my voice could betray the quake beneath it. He didn't just stand behind me at graduation. He stood behind every piece of paper I submitted to become who I am. I walked into the kitchen slowly, clutching the page. Everett and Marlene were standing at the stove, talking about grilled salmon or some other meaningless detail. Their laughter stopped when they saw my face. I dropped the document on the counter. "So," I said, calm and cutting, "who wants to explain why you let me believe Everett co-signed when this was all Dad?" Marlene froze, mid-stir. Everett cleared his throat. "Althea, it's complicated." "No, it's not," I said, voice rising. "It's printed, right there, his name, not yours." He stepped forward slightly, tone soft like a politician under pressure. "We didn't want to confuse you during senior year. It was already a lot." "No, you didn't want me to remember who actually showed up, in the fine print." Neither responded. I went to my room and pulled out the other envelope I'd found days earlier, the one about the 529 college plan. I returned to the kitchen and laid it down next to the loan document. "This too," I said. "This wasn't you either. This was Dad, since I was a baby." The silence in the room was so loud it felt like a scream. Marlene looked like she wanted to disappear. Everett crossed his arms and muttered, "Langston never said he wanted credit." "He didn't need credit," I said. "He deserved acknowledgement. That's what decent people do." I didn't wait for their next excuse. I went back upstairs and opened my laptop, took photos of both documents, filed them in a folder I named Truth. I didn't post them, not yet, but I deleted the old Instagram highlight titled My Rock that featured Everett in carefully staged dad poses. I wasn't rewriting my story. I was restoring the original version. That night, just as I was brushing my teeth, my phone buzzed with a text. No name. No contact saved. Just one line and a screenshot. "You're not the only one they lied to." The screenshot showed a bank statement with Everett's name. The balance was negative. Several lines were blacked out, but the word overdrawn screamed at the top. And suddenly, it wasn't just about what they took from me. It was what they were hiding from everyone. The moment I stepped into the foyer, I could smell barbecue and lemon-scented cleaner. The kind of forced freshness that tried too hard to say, "This is a happy home." Balloons floated near the ceiling, and I could hear the sound of ice cubes clinking in glasses somewhere deeper in the house. I was only there to pick up a box of childhood keepsakes, some art projects, a few yearbooks. But the house was buzzing with party prep, like a wedding was about to start. I set my keys down and followed the voices into the kitchen. Everett stood at the center island, folding napkins with Marlene like they were co-hosting a talk show, matching polos, matching smiles. "What's all this?" I asked, not bothering to fake the curiosity. Marlene turned, feigning surprise. "Oh, just a little gathering. Fatherhood celebration. Everett's idea." I blinked. "Fatherhood celebration?" Everett grinned. "Some of the neighbors thought it'd be nice. You know, real dads raising real daughters. Kind of a post-grad toast to parenthood." That's when I saw the sign in the dining room window. It was hand-lettered in gold script, celebrating the man who showed up. I looked over at the calendar on the fridge. Today was June 10th, Langston's birthday. "It wasn't just a party," I muttered. "It was a coronation, and you picked today on purpose." No one responded. The front doorbell rang, and guests began to arrive. Neighbors with potato salad, Everett's co-workers with cards, a few church acquaintances I hadn't seen since junior high. I drifted to the periphery, not quite part of the crowd, not yet ready to leave. Half an hour in, Everett clinked his glass and stood beneath the banner. His voice carried effortlessly. "I just want to say, being a father isn't about DNA. It's about devotion. As someone once wrote, it's not the blood that binds us, but the commitment to never walk away." People applauded. Marlene dabbed her eyes. I didn't move. That line, it was from my college essay, one of the rewritten versions, one of the pieces of me they had lifted without asking. I stepped back toward the living room. A projector lit up a blank wall, and someone dimmed the lights. A slideshow began. Everett and Marlene through the years. Birthdays, vacations, school events. Me, always smiling, always perfectly posed. But something felt wrong. In the photo from our Oregon trip, the one where I had worn a raincoat 2 sizes too big, Langston had been standing next to me, arm on my shoulder. In this version, he was gone, cropped out, as if he'd never been there. It wasn't just omission, it was erasure. I stood in the dark as photo after photo played. Ones I remembered clearly, with edits I couldn't unsee. In the background of one birthday shot, the blurry outline of Langston had been blurred further. In another, he had been replaced by a new frame, conveniently zoomed in on Everett's face. I left without saying a word. I walked around the side of the house, down the driveway, and sat on the curb like I used to after middle school, waiting for someone who rarely came on time. I opened Google Photos, scrolled through the shared family album folder. Dozens of images were gone. Others had been altered. I sent myself an email with every screenshot I could grab. Subject: Originals, proof of memory. By the time I got home, the noise in my chest had settled into a solid block. Not rage, not sadness, just resolve. I pulled out a clean sheet of paper and wrote a letter. Not to Marlene, not to Everett, to Langston. I don't know why I let them edit you out, but I'm done letting anyone edit me. I printed out the slideshow frames, the financial documents, the admission edits. I added a post-it note. This is your chapter too. Then I opened Instagram. I didn't write a post. I didn't craft a caption. I just uploaded one photo, me and Langston at a park bench, when I was 6. He had his arm around my back, and we were both eating push pops. The timestamp was visible in the corner. July 2007. I hit post and locked my phone. By the next morning, the story had over 1,200 views. No comments, no tags. Just one message request from someone I hadn't spoken to since elementary school. Finally, you're telling the real story. The envelope was taped crooked to my front door. No return address, no handwriting, just a blank brown pouch barely thicker than the flap itself. I stood there staring at it, keys still in my hand, like it might whisper what was inside if I waited long enough. I peeled it off and opened it on the kitchen counter. A single USB drive slipped into my palm. No markings, no context. I didn't recognize it, but something about the weight of silence that followed made me move slower than usual. I plugged it into my laptop. One file. Audio Zuzu Ford M4A. I pressed play. There was a faint hum at first, then static, then my mother's voice. Clear, casual, unmistakable. As long as she believes Everett handled it all, it keeps things clean, she said, almost laughing. Langston's too proud to correct her, you know that. Everett's voice followed, low and smooth. He signed it. We just let the system assume it was me. No lies, just good timing. The words echoed, even after the clip ended. This wasn't forgetting. This was planned omission. I hit play again, then again. By the 4th time, I wasn't just listening, I was compiling. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I titled it, What They Did. I dragged in the audio file. Then the loan documents, the 529 plan copy, the before and after versions of my speech, one by one, not for drama, for record. They hadn't just rewritten me, they'd run a campaign. I needed more. Closure wasn't a feeling anymore, it was a file type. I called a friend who worked at a local bank. We hadn't spoken in years, but she owed me a favor from the time I helped her fix her resume the night before a job interview. I need you to look up a credit file, I said. A few hours later, she called back, cautious. I can't send it directly, but I can tell you what I saw. Everett had opened a line of credit in my name. Co-signed, without permission, using Langston's info. It had been approved based on Langston's score, but when payments defaulted, Everett closed the account before it could spiral. It never touched my record, but it had existed. He didn't just borrow money, I whispered. He borrowed identity and trust. I didn't pace. I didn't cry. I called. Marlene answered after 2 rings. "I need to talk," I said. "Putting you on speaker." There was a pause. "Althea?" I played the audio file. She didn't interrupt. She didn't deny. I could hear Everett in the background say, "What is that?" I let it play through. Every word. Then I said, "I'm done playing the loyal daughter in your staged family photo." Her voice came out small, not broken, cornered. "Don't ruin everything now." I didn't yell. "You already did." Then I hung up. Later that night, I opened a new email. No subject, no message. I attached the recording and the credit file, sent it to Langston. Then I opened my college essay again, the one Everett helped polish. The cursor blinked where I'd left off before submitting it months ago. I added a new paragraph, fingers steady. There are truths that don't fit in applause lines, but they matter more than anything that does. And if silence was how they kept power, I was about to make noise. Langston didn't say anything when I walked in, just nodded and pointed to the spare room, like I already knew what I was looking for. He didn't ask why I came. He didn't need to. The room was quiet, still carrying that faint scent of old carpet and something sweet like cedar. I hadn't been there in years, not really. The walls had been painted since then, but the shelf near the window still held the dusty model I made in 7th grade for a solar system project, each planet slightly lopsided, glued together with ambition and too little time. On the desk was a wrapped package. Neatly done, blue paper, silver ribbon. My name in Langston's handwriting. The sticker on the side read, "Hold for June 10th. Weeks before graduation." I stood there a long while before I touched it. Something about the packaging made me feel 10 again, like opening it might undo something I wasn't ready to face. Because once I saw what was inside, I couldn't pretend he hadn't tried. I finally peeled the ribbon, carefully folding it the way he always did. Taught me, too, when I was little, how presentation mattered. Inside was a camera, a DSLR. Real, heavy in the hand. Next to it, a card. For the life you'll document, for the truth you'll capture, for the story only you can tell. The receipt was there too, dated 3 months ago. He bought it before Everett ever dangled those car keys. I sank into the chair beside the desk, not to cry, but to breathe. The air felt dense in that room, like it carried everything I hadn't said aloud. Back at my place that night, I connected the camera to my laptop, not to test it, just to see how it fit. On the screen, my recent folders flashed up, the ones I'd been too afraid to organize. Photos from the graduation, the party, the slideshow Everett built. Me, beaming, eyes trained forward. Langston, always either cropped or cut. One by one, I deleted the highlight reels. Not in a rage, not to erase them entirely, just to make space. Then I printed out the photos that mattered. The science fair letter, the credit file, the fence photo from middle school. I lined them up across my desk like puzzle pieces slowly falling into place. Later, Dorian stopped by with takeout. He saw the camera on the table, paused. "That looks serious," he said. I nodded. "It's from my dad, the one no one posted about." He tilted his head. "You told me something once, a phrase. Be the lens, not the filter." That was him, wasn't it? My eyes widened. I had forgotten that line. But Dorian hadn't. That's when I realized Langston was part of me, even when I didn't say his name. His words had outlived the edits. The next morning, my phone lit up with a message from Marlene. "I heard you visited your father. I hope this isn't going to be a public embarrassment." No greeting, no warmth, just PR damage control disguised as concern. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened Instagram and wrote a new post. Simple. Honest. Sometimes the people who raise you aren't the ones who show up the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones who are always in the corner of the frame. I attached the photo of me and Langston from the park, age 6, the one with ice cream on my face and his hand steady on my back. I hit post and set the phone aside. That night, as I was brushing my teeth, I saw the voicemail alert. Unknown number. No transcript available. I played it. 6 words. I saw your post. Thank you. Langston. And for once, silence didn't mean distance. It meant understanding. I wasn't expecting it. The email sat at the top of my inbox with a subject line that looked like a glitch. FWD. RE. Guarantor Authorization. Everett Kincaid. No salutation, no context. It had been accidentally forwarded to me by someone in the university's financial department. Curiosity outweighed hesitation. I clicked. Inside was a thread. Multiple replies. Attached forms. It started with Everett emailing the college, requesting to be listed as my financial sponsor. The response from the office was polite but firm. Per our review, the student's file lists Langston Burris as the verified financial sponsor. No alternate guarantor will be listed without formal documentation and student consent. I read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't the rejection that shocked me. It was the fact that he tried to rewrite the file. Even after everything, he wanted credit embedded in the paperwork. Another line of falsehood, dressed in fatherly devotion. Some truths don't slap you. They land quietly, like ink drying on official paper. Permanent, impersonal, but impossible to ignore. I forwarded the thread to myself, then to my academic advisor. I attached it to my truth folder. It was no longer about uncovering lies. It was about documenting the ones they didn't think anyone would challenge. I wasn't even done processing that when a notification popped up on Instagram. Message request. From someone I barely remembered. Amanda Hughes. Used to sit behind me in homeroom. We'd shared a lab station once in chemistry. Her message was short. We all thought you were lucky to have Everett, but I saw how your real dad stood at every event, even when they didn't let him in. You just never looked back. I stared at her words. They didn't sting. They settled. She had noticed. Someone else had seen. That afternoon, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I planned. I created a carousel post. First slide, a cropped photo from graduation. Me at the podium, Everett's face conveniently out of frame. Second, a screenshot of the email with the university's logo and the sentence about Langston as sponsor. Third, the photo of the gift camera with Langston's handwriting. Final slide, a black background with a single white sentence. Visibility value. Some support systems are quiet by design, but no less real. I posted it and closed the app. By dinner, it had over 3,000 shares. Former teachers commented. Old friends messaged. Distant cousins I hadn't seen in years liked it. Left hearts, left apologies. Some people defended Everett, most didn't. Later that night, Everett texted, "Was this really necessary?" I took my time responding. "It always was. You just didn't think I'd ever have receipts." I expected more from him. A follow-up, an attempt to gaslight, something performative. Instead, a courier knocked on my door an hour later. He handed me a thick white envelope, my name printed on a label, no return address. Inside, legal documents, a drafted agreement, pages of clauses about privacy, reputation, mutual silence, a non-disclosure agreement. I didn't even read all of it, because if he thought paper would silence me, he hadn't been paying attention. The envelope sat unopened on my kitchen table for 2 hours. I made tea, washed a sink full of dishes that weren't even mine, and vacuumed a floor that didn't need it. Still, it stayed there, sealed and smug, like it was daring me to face it. Eventually, I gave in. Inside were 6 crisp pages, a formal non-disclosure agreement. The kind you see in lawsuits, not family arguments. It was labeled Mutual Confidentiality regarding past financial understandings. The language was clinical, designed to sound reasonable. In exchange for silence, both parties agreed not to misrepresent or malign the nature of our financial relationship. There was also a cover note from Everett. "Let's protect what's left." What was left? A trail of receipts, redacted truths. And me, finally done being polite. I didn't reply. I didn't even call. Instead, I grabbed my laptop, walked to the corner coffee shop, and sat by the window with an oat milk latte that tasted sharper than I expected. I opened the original draft of my college essay, the one I had written before it was polished, before Everett and Marlene took turns swapping lines, like rearranging furniture in a house they never built. I read it twice, tears threatening but not falling. Then, I added one final line. Some legacies don't need spotlights. They survive because they were built in the quiet. I published it on Medium. Title: The Version I Meant to Submit. It spread faster than I expected. Former teachers commented with heart emojis and long paragraphs about integrity and finding one's voice. Strangers sent messages. One even offered to share it on her parenting blog, which she did, under the heading, When Daughters Remember What Parents Forgot. I didn't do interviews. I didn't reply to everything. I didn't need to. The point had already landed. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Marlene. "You're humiliating us." I stared at the screen, then typed back, "No, I'm liberating myself." I didn't wait for a reply. An hour later, Everett sent his own message. "You've ruined the family I built." I didn't bother answering that one, because it wasn't a family, it was a brand. And I was never its spokesperson, I was its product. The silence that followed didn't feel cold. It felt clean. Finally. That evening, Langston emailed me. No subject line, no greeting. Just 4 words. I read it. Proud of you. I sat back and exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. When I got home later that night, there was a small envelope taped to my door. No name, just handwriting I recognized. Dorian's. Inside was a folded note. "I never liked Everett," it read, "but I admire how you chose to deal with him." I smiled. For the first time in a while, it wasn't forced. That night, as I was about to power down my laptop, another notification popped up. An email. Subject line: Women's College Panel. Narratives We Reclaim. They were inviting me to speak, to share my story. I stared at the screen, rereading the invitation. I didn't feel nervous, or undeserving, or small. There was no shame left, just certainty. I wasn't telling my story for them anymore. I was telling it for me. It started with another forwarded email. This one from a community board I didn't even know I was on. Everett had been nominated, by a neighbor of course, for Father of the Year. Attached was the chain. The nomination read like an ad. Everett Kincaid, who raised a bright young scholar with values of excellence and commitment. And then, a reply from the board chair. Short, surgical. In light of recent disclosures and confirmed records, we are withdrawing this nomination. Justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it shows up in plain text. Quietly, like breath fogging a mirror. Then it clears. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. But I did open my laptop. I typed a new email to Everett and Marlene. Subject line: For the record. Attached was the final version of my college essay, the one they'd edited out of me, then tried to own. I CC'd the college financial office, the alumni publication team who once asked me to do a student spotlight, but then ghosted me when I asked to include Langston. I added just one line. Let's make sure the right people get credit, for once. The next day, the University Alumni magazine published my piece. The feature didn't include a photo of me in a cap and gown. It was a scan of the receipt Langston had taped to the camera box. For her future, Langston Burris. In the Q&A section, they asked me, "What do you hope others take away from your story?" I wrote, "Sometimes the real heroes are the ones you almost edited out." I never mentioned Everett or Marlene by name. I didn't have to. Their silence was enough. A week later, Everett's employer reached out to him about the financial inconsistencies. A contact told me his name had come up in internal HR documentation tied to a pending audit. Marlene stepped down from the PTA board. No announcement, just a note sent to members. Personal family transitions. I said nothing. I posted nothing. They gave me erasure. I gave them restraint. That Friday, Langston came to visit. It was his first time seeing my apartment. He looked around like someone checking the frame of a house he helped build, but never lived in. He saw the camera on the shelf, the printed essay in a small wooden frame. He didn't touch anything, didn't say much. Just this. "You don't owe me anything." And I said, "I know. That's why I gave you everything." He nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Then he asked if I wanted to go grab lunch, and we left the apartment like two people who finally shared a language. That evening, I sat in front of my laptop again. But this time, it wasn't to write another essay, it was to record. The first episode of my podcast. Title, Invisible Lines, Stories That Got Cut. I adjusted the mic, clicked record, and began. "This isn't about blame," I said. "It's about reclaiming." Because every stolen story deserves a retelling, on my terms.